He's been here since the very beginning. From 1992, Kano has been terrorizing the player base with a lightning-fast Kano ball, decent projectiles, and a playstyle that just screams disrespectful. In line with his character, if you think about it. However, as we always try to answer the question in this series, how good was Kano overall in his 30 years of competitive play? Well, after a fair while, admittedly, it is time to jump in once more to the competitive history series, where we uncover just how good, or bad, Kano has often been in his competitive lifetime. My name is Ketchup, and I hope you enjoy today's episode. As always, we have to start from the very beginning. The very first Mortal Kombat, although it had a small roster to play with, did have Kano in that roster, where we would see his iconic moves for the very first time. The two major attacks to really highlight here are simple. The first is the Kano Ball. This is a very fast, advancing special that can knock the opponent to the ground, and it does decent damage. Now, this move looks simple, but it isn't for one reason, and that is the input. You have to basically rotate the stick in a 360 motion, forward, down, back, up. The easier way is to hold block while performing it, but anybody that's ever played an original MK arcade machine knows that this input is a bit of a controller destroyer. I always worry I'm going to break my joystick when I do this move, and although it is easier on pad, back then, especially before the home ports, pad wasn't an option. Now, the second move is much easier, but once again it involves holding block. Back forward while blocking is the knife toss, and this projectile is extremely solid. It's fast, good damage in a game like this, and it does the exact job you hope it does. And it's easier to perform than a Kano ball, so that is a plus also. Outside of the moves though, Kano is a very simple character. I mean, this is a simple game. It was the first of its kind in a Mortal Kombat sense. So essentially, Kano can be fit into a brawler-type character whose entire moveset is built around getting at a closer range and capitalizing on situations to hit big damage. Now, I say big damage because Kano is one of the few characters with certain normals that can land giant combos, even in the final revision, which was actually designed to try and limit combos compared to the earlier versions that gave almost every character 100% damage situations. Now, Kano's jump punch is one of those super fast, low to the ground jump-ins that can juggle in the corner and mid-screen, working hand in hand with his Kano ball should you get the input right, which is definitely easier said than done thanks to the circular motion the move demands. In the corner, however, Kano's uppercut is a launcher. Now that is similar to someone like Johnny Cage, and this uppercut launcher can turn into 70% damage for even a 4-hit combo, and it is a great tool to have in a game like this. One of the major downsides of Kano here is that he's significantly more unsafe than the other characters. Now, what I mean by this is that an avenue for high damage here is usually a high punch anti-air into some kind of extended juggle, whether it's a jump in, whether it's just high punch into Scorpion Spear. The Kano ball on block just so happens to set Kano up into this exact vulnerable situation, so a knowledgeable opponent can easily take half of your life or more just because they successfully blocked one special attack. That said, the combination of fast and effective specials and access to high damage tends to have Kano sit in the mid-tier of MK1. Well, original MK1 anyway. He has the tools to get the job done, although slightly harder to execute, but he also isn't quite as strong as a Johnny Cage or a Sonya. In this game, Kano is definitely not bad, and in a roster this small, that is a given, I suppose, but in the right hands, Kano can be very deadly. So we're going to skip vanilla MK3 here and go right into Ultimate. Some characters changed significantly from vanilla to Ultimate MK3, but Kano really isn't one of those cases. Now, Ultimate MK3 took the idea of Kano in the first Mortal Kombat and sort of expanded on it, taking his brawler design and simply giving him more tools to the point where he's extremely solid, and some would say, even now, potentially underrated due to how much he has on paper. Firstly, the Kano Ball is back, but this game has two versions. The standout, forward advancing one works the exact same as the first game, but the input in this game is to hold low kick for a couple of seconds and release. The older Mortal Kombats really liked their held button moves, and although it's not awful, held input for Kano Ball makes some of his combos feel really tricky and complicated if you aren't experienced with the character, and even then, it can still be quite tough. The second ball is a diagonal one. Now this is an easier move to do in the heat of the moment, and the different angle just means it's used for slightly different situations. It won't go as far forward in some combos, but a upwards hitting move is always welcome. The other moves added expand on his other character elements. So first, his knife toss is back, and it isn't the fastest projectile in the game, but a projectile is a projectile, and it has a standard input this time, which is down back high punch. This one won't be used a ton, but it's a nice option to have as an extra. The knife can also be used for a close range slash, which is down forward high punch, and I've seen some pretty wild corner combos on the home ports of this game using this move, but not so much on arcade. Kano has an air throw in this game, which in this game is a big deal. Air throws help deal with cross-up attacks, it can make a random jump kick that you hit do more damage, it's a great combo ender because it's extra damage and a decent knockdown for pressure afterwards. This is a great tool for Kano in general. Finally, Kano has a choke move. Now, yeah, okay, it is funny, it's even funnier with the sound on, but as silly as this move looks, it's actually kind of broken. In the right circumstances in the corner, this choke can infinite into true 100% damage. The only issue is, it's really hard. It doesn't look hard, but the timing is so precise that you've got to be a Kano master to really get this consistent. You can still get great damage just by hitting 2 of them, for example, so all hope isn't lost if you can't get the constant loops, and it is a great tool, just an extremely difficult one. Combo string and button-wise, Kano has quite a lot, actually. He's got various launchers, he's got OK damage from his kick-starting strings, which are historically useful for interrupting an opponent's low poke should they try and interrupt. His kicks lead to launchers, and that's a great tool, and he has extended launcher options thanks to his many relaunch possibilities. I've demonstrated the relaunch with the robots here because they're just a bit more consistent, but basically when it comes to combos and how to obtain them, he really isn't missing all that much. Now, one of his more underrated tools is a great sweep. I've seen even Biggs, the Ultimate MK3 god, talk about this sweep in the past in particular, and you can definitely see it. It's got good range, he's low to the ground, and importantly, it's not as unsafe as other sweeps where some characters can punish a sweep for massive damage. Now, in terms of the meta, here is where it gets a bit complicated. Kano, in theory, has almost everything you could want. He's got mobility, decent damage, relaunchers, an infinite in the corner in the right circumstances, okay normals, although some of them aren't fantastic, but he has an air throw, pressure, fast special moves. You look at what makes a character good in this game, and Kano has most of these things. However, he often does still sit around the higher mid-tier in various tier lists. He can sometimes be found in a player's top 10. Now, high mid-tier isn't awful by any means, but in this game, like many classic arcade fighters, has a pretty set god tier with the likes of Cabal, Human Smoke, Ermac, and others, like so many characters that are out of control. Kano has a lot of tools, but a big thing is that we often don't really see Kano thrive competitively. That could be for various reasons. Maybe he's a bit awkward to play. His move inputs, especially Kano Ball, are a real chore to get out in the heat of the moment. There are perhaps other characters with a similar tool set that are easier to play, with an easier game plan to enforce. He really is a strange one here, because all of the signs point to this character having everything you need to be top tier. He just often isn't, really. With a game that has a legacy as rich and plentiful as Ultimate MK3, it's character usage and experience that matters most. And I certainly can't sit here and argue with the pros. I mean, he's a great character, just perhaps still a bit underrated. Trilogy is actually an important one to cover here, because although the game is often seen as similar to Ultimate MK3, the N64 version of this game is a very different experience. Jabs mean less in general, as the low pokes have different frame data. Things like sweeps are far better, crouching punches and kicks all have the chance to reverse momentum and grant pressure to the defender. It results in some characters being different, and Kano is one of them. Whether it is enough to make him better is another story, but I need to note that this is specifically the N64 version in this video, because from a meta standpoint, Kano is arguably a stronger character because of these changes. However, what matters more is that he was given a new move, and it is a new Kano Ball. Sometimes called the Crazy Kano Ball, this move is a Kano Ball animation, but it just sort of goes all over the place. It doesn't seem totally random, it's clearly like some patterns at play here, and whether the game decides which pattern is here is a different story, but the Crazy Kano Ball, while being a funny new addition, doesn't really have much of a place unless it's going to close out a round with chip damage, or you desperately need to avoid being chipped out yourself. Trilogy for the N64 is a nice little bonus appearance, and it is in no small part to the Crazy Kano Ball! Now we enter the 3D era, starting with Deadly Alliance, where Kano made a new appearance. He's a pretty solid character on paper with what the game requires a character to be strong, besides a few things, but overall, when you look at the tier lists, especially the older ones, he often sits on the lower end of things. His tools are okay, I suppose, but the question is it enough? Especially, is it cheap enough? Now, all three of his stances are actually usable, and that's a good start. Jingyi has a 1-1 string where the first two hits are fast and backdash cancelable. 1-1-2 stance change is a pop-up that cannot be teched on hit. Standing 4 is a mid, and this stance is mostly used to poke at an opponent with your fast backdash cancelable normals. Importantly, this stance also has the reversal stance ability, which is one of the best abilities in the game. In Deadly Alliance, Kano is a master of Aikido, if you'd believe it. 1 and 2 are both mid-hitting grabs that, again, can be backdash cancelled on block. This stance features a single hit low in back 4, and it has a back 3 mid, which, again, can be backdash cancelled. This stance has another top-tier stance ability as it features the power-up, which is a significant damage buff. His weapon stance is the butterfly knives, and it's not terrible. Standing 1 is backdash cancelable mid, a normal many dual-wielding characters have, and it is usually just as strong. Back 1, back 2 is another high damage string that many dual-wielding weapon characters have, and again, it's high damage. Standing 2 is the mid launcher, and down 3 is a fast low poke. A lot of characters in 3D MK with 2 knives as their weapon have these exact moves, and in Deadly Alliance, backdash cancelling those moves that can have it makes them pretty decent in the neutral. He's only got 2 special moves here, an eye laser with decent range, and his Kano Ball, which is fast, but unsafe. I mean, they do exactly what you'd expect, really. The overall game plan of Kano can be a relatively safe one thanks to all of his backdash cancelable options. However, his mix-ups are where there isn't as much going for him. He's safe, and he can poke at you with various strings and normals, but without mix-up, there isn't as much to work with. He has mids, but not so many decent lows, and usually without mix-up, you need other things to make up for it. And while there isn't terrible damage thanks to the power-up that Kano has, nothing here screams ridiculous, which unfortunately in Deadly Alliance, you do need a little bit of broken to thrive at high level. Kano is very honest in this game, and in 3D Mortal Kombat, that sadly usually doesn't cut it. He's got okay tools on paper, but whether it's enough to compete with the broken god tiers is a very different story. I mean, you could play Kano here and have some fun, but it's where you're going to fight the Scorpions, the Dramins, or the Bo Raichos that's where you're going to have some trouble. Armageddon is where Kano tends to sort of tank in the tier list. He wasn't great in Deadly Alliance, but he's definitely bottom tier in this one. All of the things that were at least he has this situation are no longer present, as Armageddon removed backdash cancelling, which was the one thing Kano in Deadly Alliance had going for him. Now, in Armageddon, there are some changes to his moves that has somewhat updated him from Deception. And when I say Deception, I mean that his hand-to-hand stance, which is the return of Jingyi, originally belonged to Kira in that game, so that hand-to-hand has basically been given back to him with the slight changes that she received. Some of the moves like 1-1-2 are similar. The standing 4 knee, the low down 3, they're all here, but there are some extensions that, while they were in Deadly Alliance, weren't as useful because of backdash cancelling. So 1-1 up 4, 1-1 4-3. They can all be used a bit more here because they have pushback, and with moves generally being more unsafe thanks to no backdash cancel, they kind of get added to your move list by default, so you have something else extra to go for to keep the opponent on their toes. The problem is very few of these strings make a significant difference here, they're just extra options. Kano did receive a few new special moves, however. There is a new charge punch, but it's kind of rubbish, it's just a normal straightforward punch. There's nothing special about it, and it is what it is, I suppose, but the other move is a damage buff. This damage buff is not unique to Kano, some of the other characters were given basically the same power-up. It's okay, but it doesn't last very long, and it's not like Kano has major mix-ups that can turn this buff into anything substantial. His weapon stance has the easy air infinite set, something common with dual weapon characters, but outside of this, Kano is totally forgettable, and in many tier lists you find online, he's very near the bottom. It's just not that exciting, nothing powerful, he's as basic as anything, and sadly, didn't make a single splash in any kind of possible meta. Alright, here is the strangest and most difficult section of this video, Kano in Mortal Kombat vs DC Universe. This game was niche anyway, but I gotta tell you, with Kano in this game, he wasn't popular. If you want to find a bunch of Kano tech from old forums or videos or whatever, sorry, I could barely find a thing. Most of the old forums and the videos and even the threads just don't really exist on the internet anymore. Now, I grew up fighting Kano, as that was Mustard's main in this game, but that was before we got competitive with anything, so my opinion back then doesn't matter. All I remember is high damage and decent special moves. This is genuinely the first time I have ever looked into a character's appearance and found not a single guide or overview. So, as a first for the Competitive History series, I'm going to sort of have to run this one on my own and leave the rest of it up to either yourself, or if anyone's watching this video that played the game hardcore back in the day, I would love to hear what you say in the comments. That said, let us dive into Kano and show you what we're working with. We can discuss his tier list placement afterwards. The special moves are mostly expected. The first is Kano Ball, this time a back-forward 4 input, and it is extremely fast. It's a great combo ender, and this move can be used airborne. The up ball that Kano has is down forward 2, again it's super fast, and this one has a pro move attached with forward 4, making it hit twice for extra combo damage, or different mobility if the ball is blocked. Now, down back 1 is a knife toss. It's a fast projectile with decent startup. It can be used mid-juggle to extend into more damage, and this exact kind of combo is, for the first time, where Kano would feature this, and it would lead into more modern games. It's just always interesting how it started here. Back 1 is an eye laser which can restand a juggle or airborne opponent. Down back 2 is a parry, which depending on the move you parry does something different. Finally, and why I saved it for last, down forward 1 is a strike grab. It's not a command grab and it can be blocked, but on hit will side switch and splat the opponent to the ground. The big thing is there's a pro move here in down back 2, which turns it into a full combo launcher. And I've saved this move till last because this pro move gives Kano unreasonably high damage for very little execution. All you have to do is get the pro move timing down, and you're hitting like 65% combos for nothing, off buttons that can indeed be hit confirmed. This grab works from strings, from juggles, the amount you can perform will change depending on the combo itself, so there is some experimentation needed if you're optimizing damage, but overall, a 66% combo because you hit a 2-hit string starting from a mid is quite good. His buttons are unfortunately so-so. Back 2 launches, back 4 is a low attack that does low damage but it has hit advantage, standing 4 is a mid but standing 4-3 is a high, standing 1 and down 1 are both plus on block but your standing 1 is really slow. He's definitely not got the greatest buttons in this game, but he does have solid special moves and immensely high damage. One thing he cannot do in this game is combo from his breaker, as his animation, both after a juggle or on the ground, is a straight knockdown and not a launch, so no combo breaker into Kano Ball for you. When talking about his tier list placement, I mean, I've got to be honest, it's really hard to tell. Every single tier list I've ever seen on this game has Kano right in the middle of the tier list, but any possible explanation that remains tends to be a "I don't really know much about this character" situation, which, from a research perspective, makes life quite difficult. And I certainly don't want to rely on my own memories of this character because, look, I didn't play the game like that when I was a teenager. I just did Baraka special moves and thought I was godlike. But either way, we have a character who doesn't have the best buttons in the world, but he has decent specials and, frankly, absurd resourceless damage. If he hits you and confirms into throw, it's half your life, every single time. An air-to-air punch, a launcher, all of this leads to high damage, and in the neutral, knife toss and eye laser, they're both pretty fast. Airborne Kano Ball, upwards Kano Ball with the pro move on it. All of these make Kano a little bit more high octane from a gameplay sense, but the question really is, how good is all of it when you put it together? Because from a damage point of view, Kano could be one of the hardest hitting punishers in the entire roster, because he doesn't have to rely on infinites, or rage, or combo breakers. His damage comes from standard regular moves. Now, I get the feeling a lot of his mid-tier placements might have been due to how unpopular he was, and how little high-level data a lot of players might have had, but that is just a theory. Not to mention the netcode of this game was really poor, so characters function differently online to offline, and there was barely any competitive offline play for MK vs DC, leaving this character as one giant question mark, in my opinion, but tell me in the comments section if you think different. And now we go into Mortal Kombat 9, where Kano is absolutely one of the worst characters in the roster. He's just forgettable in every imaginable way, and although he isn't the worst character, he's definitely down there. But first of all, let's look at his moves once again. Kano Ball is back, and it's fast. It can be done in the air, and the enhanced version for a bar has armor on it. An immediate issue with this move in this game is that the classic input from the first MK returned, making this attack extremely awkward to get out when you definitely needed it. The upwards Kano Ball is back with a easier motion of down forward 2, and it's mostly a combo ender or a last minute anti-air. Additionally, it can be a decent wake up. Knife Toss is a very good projectile here, with the enhanced version throwing 2 at once, which is great for combos and higher damage. The choke returns, but outside of maybe using it on block or something, it isn't particularly useful in this game. Kano has an air throw, just like MK3, and air throws are just as useful in this game for last-second damage and dealing with air-to-airs. Finally, his X-Ray is an unblockable grab, and it does fairly high damage for an X-Ray in this game, but as is the way in MK9, X-Rays aren't useful, because you need your super meter to do everything else. When it comes to normals and strings, he does have a decent amount of them. 2-1-2 is a launcher, and it's used for loads of combos. Forward 3, back 2 is a low launcher. Back 2 is a slow overhead that you can special cancel. Back 1 is a fast mid that goes into a launcher on its third hit. Even his low pokes are standard low pokes. His buttons aren't exactly terrible overall, because he does have a lot of stuff that you may want at a basic level. But the issue with Kano in this game is that he is painfully average, and he doesn't excel at a single thing that someone else can't do better. You have a character with basically no mix-up, as the overhead is definitely reactable. He has okay combos, but a lot of them are from mids, so it's not like you're going to open people up all the time. He doesn't really have plus frames. His armor is extremely awkward to use because of that awful 360 motion. Besides a slightly okay ranged game with Knife Toss, there just wasn't anything special about this character. Now, there was one very specific patch a long time ago, which didn't last long, where Kano's up ball was harder to punish. But that was also during the days of delay-based netcode, so struggling to punish Kano up ball was a mixture of better frames back then and delay netcode making it harder to deal with. But that patch only lasted a few weeks, maybe even a month, and it was swiftly gone. Outside of seeing the odd Kano player doing nothing but throwing knives at range and doing wake-up Kano Ball online, this character was one of the least represented in tournaments by far, and his sheer degree of average made him an unattractive pick to all players, having nothing special to get the job done versus the high-tier characters. Kano is in most players' bottom 5, and if he isn't, he's right next to it. Mortal Kombat X is where the threat and presence of Kano would skyrocket compared to his previous version. I feel that it's the first NRS game that really got his fighting dirty idea totally right, and with the variations adding extra stuff to the mix, this character was a nightmare regardless of patches. But there is still a pretty interesting story here. In this game, Kano had his Kano Ball, and it is the best one yet. This Kano Ball can be done airborne, again, it has a simpler input of back-forward 3, so that's a major improvement, and on Enhanced, this move can be held down or cancelled. Now holding this move isn't new, he was always able to do it in a lot of different games, but where you cancel it, that's where the new stuff appeared. The good thing about the cancel is that when you enhance and it hits up close, you can cancel the ball afterwards to get a full grounded combo, and that's really good for hit confirming. Up Ball is back, and it's a great armored wake-up attack, being safe on block when you spend the bar. It forces an opponent to try and make it whiff if they want to punish it. And Knife Toss is a basic projectile again, but once again it's pretty damn good. You got fast projectiles, the enhanced one throws a second one with plus frames. He's got some good foundations here because of his normals and strings that go hand in hand with it all. Some key normals for Kano is a back 1 mid, a low confirmable back 3 combo string. 112 is a great 3 hit that can be hit confirmed or used at the end of a combo for big damage. His specials are all fast, so you're always going to have a good combo ender. His down 4 is super low to the ground. His down 1 and down 3 both have good range, and his neutral jump punch is low to the ground and super fast. My point is that you have the beginnings of a rock-solid character, but now let's talk about variations because they improved Kano in a massive way. Let's talk about Cybernetic first. Cybernetic is the ranged variation, and it had some decent tools up close as well. The first thing is that the Kano Knife Toss was replaced with a mid version. It doesn't do huge damage, but it has fast recovery. The enhanced version fires way more of them, and it can lead to combos or great chip damage on block. Some combo strings gain extensions that you can spend meter on to get even bigger combos. Kano gets a restand with his back 1 combo string ender. And of course, the Eye Laser special move is a meterless combo extension. Great for getting more damage when you finally land a hit. The Eye Laser has a upwards version that is a great option for more combo damage as well, so in the corner, this character can hit you for about 50% in the right hands. Kano's damage is immense. Now, Cutthroat isn't going to open you up all the time. You have to rely on instant air Kano Ball if you want a fast overhead, which is death on block, but this variation was always used for zoning and defensive play, more so than general rushdown, but it was good at what it did, and it hit you really hard. Commando is the least popular of the three because it's very much the grappler variation. Kano gains a bunch of grabs, different strike enders, different combo extenders from similar moves, only with different animations and launch properties, and he gets a high and low parry. This variation was definitely the hardest to utilize of the three because it was pretty tricky to execute sometimes. Plus, like any grappler character, required a lot more reads and conditioning to get successful grabs on block. This variation was a bit more reliant on the Kano Ball cancels to get grounded confirms, and it made a lot more use of the enhanced Knife Toss on block as it had plus frames, which for any grappler is a good situation to have. The thing is, this variation was really cool and it could definitely be dangerous in the right hands. You just rarely saw it. But what wasn't as rare was the third variation, which is Cutthroat. Now, Cutthroat was very much what you could consider Kano's end game variation. This is the one that most Kano players moved on to, and this was the one doing the vast majority of the crazy MKX stuff. The first thing this variation was given was a new back 1. Instead of a mid, this one's an unreactable overhead that can be special cancelled into a launcher, as well as having a 3-hit string attached to it. A knife launcher is a new move here where it's safe on block normally, but while it's unsafe on enhanced, becomes a confirmable launcher. You can do multiple of these launchers for one combo if you need to close out a round, and Kano gets an advancing mid-launching string, so again, great for combos. Finally, Kano gains a buff special, which makes his damage a lot higher while draining a bit of his own life while it's active. The enhanced version is far more potent and it can be used for combo extensions, but the health drain is more severe also. Overall, this was the rushdown variation with the highest damage, the biggest unreactable mix-ups, and overall gave Kano his highest reward. Kano's position in the tier list has always been extremely prominent, and especially with Cutthroat, is one of those variations that we always saw in competitive do pretty well, whether it was Biohazard, who played a fair few variations, Yupei in the EU, who was always placing in top 8s with Cutthroat Kano. I mean, this character was always around, and really had the tools that made an MKX character a problem. You had good buttons, unreactable mix, a fast run, great low pokes, great armor in the final patch. Interestingly, it did take a while for Cutthroat to be explored like that, as early on in the game's life, a lot of Kano players were using Cybernetic, and they were all just convinced it was his best variation, while Cutthroat was sitting there the entire time. But across the patches there would be some changes. Back 1 would only come out as a single hit on block with Cutthroat, making it technically more unsafe. There was a shortly lived patch where the Commando variation was doing some crazy stuff on hit and block, but when you're looking at end game MKX, Kano is more than a solid character. He's a really good one. He isn't sitting in like top 5s or anything, but I doubt anyone's ever going to argue that Kano was pretty damn scary the entire time MKX was played competitive. I mean, it still gets played now by the dedicated hardcore player base, and when you see Kano now, you're always reminded over how strong he always was in this game. Mortal Kombat 11 Kano is a weird one. He was weak at the very beginning, but after a few tweaks and patches, and especially the introduction of the custom variations, Kano became significantly better, to the point where, in the right hands, he seemed like he could sit within the top 10 of a tier list. Because the moves changed so much in this game from variation to variation, I would like to once again, for this section, talk about variations and what they were doing, and how this character evolved in the competitive meta because of it. Ripper was the most used of the two, back when there was only 2 set variations, and this one was kind of a starting point for where Kano would eventually go. On top of the basic Kano moves like Knife Toss, Kano Ball, and Air Kano Ball, it's all back. The added moves were firstly extended strings. These could result in a last-minute overhead or an extender that when you amplify it can give you bigger combos, or you can make your single-hit overhead more dangerous with an extender. It has a rare KB attached to it. Ripper had a parry, but the parry wasn't any good, so nobody used it. However, the one move that did get used was Lumbar Check, a command grab. This command grab could be used from various buttons on block to create a tick throw. It could often be used after a down 4, a down 1, single hits that, if the opponent blocks, there's still a mix-up they have to deal with. Now this variation allowed Kano to be aggressive and in your face, but it didn't have every tool you would need. But it was pretty good at what it did, which was Rushdown. Dirtbag was the second variation, and while it lost quite a lot of combo tools, it buffed the Kano Ball. Vegemite is a buff special that grants access to the upwards Black Dragon Ball. On top of that, the ball gets a hit of armor while the power-up is active. But the main factor for this variation was the Molotov Cocktail and the Chemical Burn. The cocktail will create flames on the ground for damage over time, and the Chemical Burn, while also applying damage over time, could combine with the flames for a new hit effect that could sometimes lead to a full combo. Dirtbag was definitely not as fundamentally strong, and it wasn't as popular, but if you got the exact right knockdown situation or setup, you could create some rather ridiculous set play. It was just very specific. When they added a third variation, they introduced Rat Bag, which was more of a combo variation once more. It replaced your Knife Toss with a mid-hitting eye laser, but it's slower, and it's not as generally useful. It's a lot worse on block too. I mean, it has a crushing blow attached, but it just isn't as good overall as the knife. The Snake Bite is the bigger move here, and it's expensive as it costs 2 slots to equip, leaving this variation with less moves than usual because you have one move that's replaced another one, and one move that left an extra slot so you can't have an extra attack. I mean, Snakebite can turn every hit into a combo, so if combos were what you're after, it could work. I know Mustard really enjoyed this variation back when he mained Kano, but the issue was you have a great combo extender, but you lose so much in favor of it that the variation wasn't that great. It's not exactly like this third variation saved the character or something, but that would change when Ultimate released because it introduced custom variations for tournament play. Now, there are a bunch of possible Kano variations, and if anybody ever watched Biohazard, who was definitely the most famous Kano player, you're gonna know a lot of these different options. But in tournament, when Kano became more popular, it was due to one specific variation that really took over the rest, and that is lumbar check command grab, chemical burn, and a previously unused move, the bio pull. The pull is a fast starting special, considering the range it has, and on Amplify will allow a full combo. This means you can whiff punish things, you can turn anything into a full combo, just like the Rat Bag variation did, but here it's a one-slot ability, and it allows you to have a command grab and a setup tool. You see, Dirtbag had set play with the Molotov and Chemical Burn, but Chemical Burn's Amplify saw Kano pull out a lighter and set fire anyway, so there's a very similar idea in play, but it's just costing you one move instead of two. The goal of Kano in the end game when using this variation was to get the opponent in the corner. Kano's low pokes were great at chipping you away as they led to mix-ups from command grab. On hit, you've got great corner carry. His projectiles can compete in neutral so you can't zone him. And the infamous buttons like his forward one string, which was confirmable on hit into biopull, was a knockdown if all three hits connected, so that's corner carry. And on block, the headbutt section of this string is plus, giving Kano another turn, and in turn, another mix-up. The moment this variation started being used by the likes of Rewind, the Mighty Unjust, and look, so many other players, this was a popular variation, this character became way more popular in competitive play. This variation had mobility thanks to Kano Ball, good pokes, good pressure, good mix-ups, was difficult to zone out, had some of the dirtiest set play in the entire game, and a game plan that worked versus most of the casts. Now, it didn't work versus everybody, as the second hit of Kano's forward one would whiff versus some characters, but in the majority of matchups, nothing whiffed at all. So, for the most part, this one variation was a total menace, and single-handedly made people take Kano more seriously. Now, Kano had issues in the early game of MK11. He was considered quite weak overall, and it was definitely impressive that at the lowest point in the character's existence, the very first combo breaker, which was one of the most registered for MK tournaments in history at the time, saw both Biohazard and our very own Mustard make it to the final day, where top 24 would be played out. Mustard, of course, moved more into commentary after that, and Biohazard continued to grind and would eventually become the most famous Kano player of them all. But after changes to various moves, and most notably the custom variations, Kano eventually became a serious threat. He's not like in many characters' top 5, but this one variation could definitely be top 10. Kano was a major addition at the end game of MK11. And now we end with the current most up-to-date Mortal Kombat 1. Kano makes an appearance here, but exclusively as a cameo fighter. His assist moves acting as you would expect because the classic style of Kano was clearly what the team was going for. Kano is a serious cameo in this game for one reason: 2 very strong ambush assists. Kano's first move is the eye laser. It hits mid and it does a bit of damage, but it sucks. I personally think it's the worst cameo move in the game because it's slow, does a bit of damage, but it's so unsafe you can punish it from full screen when you block it. Most of the time you see this move, it's by accident. And you're probably going to say, oh, Ketchup, he's got the worst cameo move, or how can he possibly be good? Well, it's because he is one of the cameo assists to have 2 ambush moves that work extremely well for certain characters, and that's rare. Ambush move number 1 is Knife Toss. Kano comes in, throws his knives, and that's it. But they work for block pressure, making things safe. Although they are highs, you can time a move just right to make the opponent jailed into blocking them. They can lead to combos if they hit under the right circumstances, and for some characters it makes getting in way easier, like a Raiden Teleport, a Baraka Blade Charge, the classic ambush move into advancing special, right? And Kano does it extremely well. What he also does well is the Kano Ball, another ambush that, on hit, it only knocks them down, but the big thing is, you can hold and charge this move. Releasing a Kano Ball on block after any move you want to make safe is something that makes this move incredibly strong. If something has a gap, or maybe it's super unsafe, Kano Ball instantly removes that stuff from play. The combination of Knife Toss and Kano Ball makes the meta of unsafe moves and party hard to cover your tracks with an ambush extremely effective. Now, Kano does take a bit of health away from you. He'll turn a 1000 HP character into 950, and even less health characters will take a major risk by picking Kano. But the utility is hard to ignore for the right character. I mean, we see a fair few characters use Kano, but none of them are more prominent in the meta right now than Raiden and Kano. Kano's utility is taken to its perfect level when Raiden is next to him, because Raiden's annoying Storm Cell chip damage into Kano Ball to remove all risk, making your teleport safer with the knife toss to cover your tracks, and the same can be said for the electric fly. The two different ambush moves that Kano has is why this style of Raiden is so ridiculous. He has a tool for every occasion, and because of these tools, Kano is definitely on the higher end of a cameo tier list. I don't think there's anything that they could change to make him worse, and I personally don't even think they should. It's what this cameo is designed to do, and it's Kano for crying out loud. He's not a nice man. His gameplay won't be nice either. But even though MK1 is still only a few months old, Kano's definitely one of the better cameos to pick if your character wants to go absolutely nuts. And that is the full competitive history of Kano in Mortal Kombat. I gotta say, didn't expect this video to be this long, but it's been nice to revisit a chunky episode in a series that so many of you are asking for. I promise to return to this series more regularly than I currently am, because I've had a blast making this video, and I have been looking at your comments, and I do know who I'm going to make next. Spoiler alert, it's another classic character. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time. Take care of yourselves, and peace out.